Hello, happy Tuesday, everybody. I'm wearing my witch's hat because it's so fitting and appropriate for our study of Macbeth and really everything that's led up to Act 3 so far. Today in the video, I'm going to talk about the scenes 1 and 2 of Act 3, and then tomorrow I'll be sending you a video about scenes 3 and 4. Thursday, if you can recall the schedule that I sent to everybody, Thursday we are going to watch together, and then Friday should be a day to kind of wrap up, ask me questions, conference, meet with me one-on-one, and we'll go from there. Let me get this set and go. Obviously, our goal here is that we're, as a group, either listening or reading Act 3 of Macbeth. We're going to view it together, too, for those of you that make it to the sessions. And I'll probably air it again Friday for those of you that maybe can't work with your schedule on Thursday. Really, the big question that we're taking a look at with Act 3 is this. How does Shakespeare show the uncontrollable effect of evil through the character of Macbeth? You know, obviously, look, and I have puppets. Our three witches represent evil in this story. And, you know, in scene 1 of Act 1, we know that they headed out to meet Macbeth after the battle was over. Their prophecies about his future sound good, but then again, we're dealing with witches here. These people really out for your best interest. At the end of Act 1, we had him see the dagger. Whether or not that was just a hallucination because he was under so much stress about whether or not to kill King Duncan, or if he, was seeing a vision from these witches. Evil is a very prominent force and element in this story. Macbeth and Banquo, I will depict them with these two soldier dudes. They are fellow Thanes. They have been on the same page. They're buddies. Banquo is someone who Macbeth was with when the witches gave their prophecies. At this point, at the beginning of Act 3, Macbeth has been crowned king. Okay. And if we were in class, somebody would get to wear the king hat at this point to read Macbeth's lines. But Banquo is a very noble person. And at the end of Act 1, at the end of Act 2, Banquo vowed that he would fight against the treasonous malice that led to Duncan's assassination. At the beginning of Act 3, what you saw is that, he's thinking, well, all of these prophecies came true for Macbeth. Did Macbeth do anything wrong or evil to do this? He's the man that swore he was going to avenge Duncan's death, and now you see his own suspicions of Macbeth. And you're going to see it doesn't take long till other people kind of suspect that maybe something was foul in how this all came about. He says, I fear thou playest most foully for it. I fear you played foully or with evil to get to be king. Of course, Banquo is not immune to the witch's prophecies about his own life. Now, it didn't say Banquo would be king, but it said that his sons would be kings. And some little bit of background and history that is actually kind of interesting. King James, who was king of England at the time that Shakespeare wrote this play, was or claimed to be a descendant of Banquo. Although the historical Banquo was a little bit different than how Shakespeare chose to depict him in a far more honorable way to honor King James. King James was King of Scotland. And, in the history of the British lineage, after Queen Elizabeth died, there was no heir to the throne. She was known as the Virgin Queen. She never married or had children. And so James was from Scotland. So again, that's another reason Shakespeare chose this Scottish history play in order to, kind of give homage and reverence to the new King of England. In scene 1, Macbeth announces he is having a feast and he invites Banquo to attend. But Banquo's going to be riding with Fleance. There's Fleance. Woo. His son first. Macbeth in public acts very nobly and very much like a king. Macbeth, when he's alone in his thoughts, though, things are a little bit different. You see the insecurity of Macbeth in scene 1 of Act 3, okay? He says, to be thus is nothing, but to be safely thus. In other words, to be king means nothing if you're not safely and securely king. And he fears Banquo. Banquo is a careful person. He knows that Banquo is someone who doesn't do things kind of quickly or without thinking about them. And Macbeth gets really angry. You see a lot of bitterness in Macbeth. Even though he got to be king, it's like, what he wanted, right? Well, not quite enough. Because Macbeth starts thinking about the fact that Banquo and the prophecy for Banquo is that Macbeth's kids get to be king, but Macbeth, he has a barren scepter. Like the scepter is the thing that the kings would hold, and it's empty. None of his children will ever be king. So he feels like, I did all this. I killed Duncan. I did this evil deed and have to live with it now just to pave the way for Banquo's kids. So you see a lot of bitterness about that. Macbeth meets with people that are aptly titled in the play, the two murderers. And they're basically hitmen that he's hired that are going to help him assassinate Banquo, but he sets them up first, and you'll see this when you watch the film. He's going to tell these murderers two things, these hitmen two things. He's going to blame Banquo for the root of all their problems. I don't know what their problems or their deal is, but some horrible things have happened to these men, and Macbeth places the blame on Banquo. And then he's going to challenge them to be like, are you just going to let him do that and not do anything about it? He's going to ask him, like, are you men? And I want you to think back about how Lady Macbeth was able to persuade Macbeth to follow through with killing Duncan with that same plea, where she knew he was too full of the milk of human kindness to do this on his own. She had to manipulate him. What man was it that first brought this idea up to me when he first was when he was telling her that he changed his mind about killing Duncan that night at the castle. And he tells them, I will put my business in your bosoms to take your enemy off. So Macbeth basically makes the case to the murderers that, he's wronged you and he's wronged me too. And if you're real men, you'll do something about it. He's going to ask or tell them that they must kill Banquo tonight and that Fleance, the son, must suffer the same fate. I want you to think, I grabbed a witch instead of Banquo. There he is. I want you to think about why Macbeth wants Banquo's kids killed, given the prophecy. Okay? That's interesting. Macbeth makes the case like, listen, it's not that I couldn't kill Banquo myself here, but we have some mutual friends, and I don't want to ruin that, so that's why I'm having you do it. Because, I'm king. I can do whatever I want, but that's kind of the argument he makes there. Scene 2 kind of shows some insight in the behind the scenes now with Lady Macbeth and Macbeth now that he has become king. LMB stands for Lady Macbeth. We learn a couple things. She's not feeling super secure either. They dwell on what she refers to as doubtful joy. Macbeth is scared. Fears shake us nightly. They're having nightmares. They've had nightmares since the murder of Duncan. His mind, he says, is full of scorpions. Things are stinging him and plaguing him. Another interesting dynamic in their marriage here is that Macbeth's plan to kill, that's a witch again. Where'd he go? Banquo and Fleance, he does not tell to his wife. Okay? He doesn't tell her. And he basically says to her, be innocent of the knowledge until thou applaud the deed. At the end of this, you see this very strong imploring of evil that he, says that he wants night to come so he can have an invisible hand in committing murder. The light and dark imagery throughout this play is pretty significant too. All right, to go back to a couple things I wanted to point out. I did note on our Google Classroom that I wanted to have an assessment on kind of like who's who and what major things have happened so far. I'm going to use quizzes. It'll be 30 multiple choice questions. I'll try to give you adequate time per item to do that. I will not make it a quick thing like I did with vocabulary. I wanted to talk to you about kind of how this Shakespeare's tragedy format fits into something that's called Freytag's Pyramid. I'm giving you a very simplified version of it here. Act 1, we have kind of like we learn a who's who, what's going on. Scotland's at war. There's these characters. There's an inciting moment, something that really gets the ball rolling. And I would say that's the witch's prophecy in this. Act 2 was a lot of the rising action, what happened after the murder, so on and so forth. Act 3 is going to contain the climax of this story. So we're going to see what it is, and it's going to be contained in the next reading that you do. I'm going to touch base tomorrow about scenes 3 and 4, and then Thursday we're going to watch. So stay tuned.